In the heart of New York City, where towering skyscrapers kissed the sky and the streets pulsed with the rhythmic energy of the wealthy and powerful, a different kind of battle was unfolding. This was a world where appearances mattered more than anything else, where the elite dined in exclusive restaurants, mingled in lavish clubs, and rubbed shoulders at high-profile galas. A place where wealth bought respect, and status was everything. Beneath the glittering surface, however, secrets festered, waiting for the right moment to burst free and shatter the illusion of perfection. Dr. William Graves was a name spoken with reverence in the corridors of prestigious hospitals and whispered in awe at the finest events in the city. A brilliant surgeon in his early 40s, Graves had built his career on his exceptional talent and ironclad dedication to his work. With his chiseled features, charming smile, and a reputation for saving lives in even the most impossible situations, he was the perfect embodiment of success. At every gala, at every charity event, he was the man everyone wanted to know, the man everyone wanted to be. Yet, beneath this polished exterior, Dr. Graves harbored a darker side. One that not even his closest friends could suspect. The doctor was well acquainted with manipulation, whether it was in the operating room, where his hands were steady and precise, or in the delicate dance of relationships, where he expertly navigated through lies and half-truths, ensuring no one ever discovered his true nature. His life was a double-edged sword, meticulously crafted to maintain an image of perfection while secretly feeding his need for control and validation. He had learned early that the greatest power lay in deception, and he wielded it with finesse. Among the glittering elite, he crossed paths with Alice Harper. Alice was everything Dr. Graves could appreciate: intelligent, ambitious, and relentless in her pursuit of success. She worked as a business consultant, rising quickly through the corporate ranks with a focus so sharp it cut through any obstacle that stood in her way. At 30, Alice had already established herself as a force to be reckoned with in the business world. She was known for her poise and her professional attire, always impeccably dressed in sleek suits that matched her razor-sharp mind. She had spent her entire life working toward success, and now that it was within her grasp, she had little time for distractions, except for the enigmatic Dr. Graves. Their first encounter came at a charity event held at a luxurious penthouse in Upper East Side in 2018. The moment Alice laid eyes on Dr. Graves, she was struck by his effortless charisma. His presence was magnetic, and when he spoke, it was with such confidence that she couldn't help but be drawn in. They exchanged pleasantries, discussing her business ventures and his recent surgeries. As they spoke, there was an undeniable connection between them. Alice, who had built her life on hard work and calculated decisions, found herself captivated by the man in front of her, someone who had it all: power, influence, and a smile that seemed to promise more than just fleeting attraction. Over the following weeks, their conversations grew more frequent. They began exchanging emails, phone calls, and eventually meeting for dinner. Alice, though driven by her career, found herself slipping deeper into the world of Dr. Graves. She believed he was everything she had been looking for in a partner, a man of substance, someone who could match her ambition. Yet, even as her feelings grew stronger, she never once questioned whether their connection was as genuine as it seemed. In her world, trust was often a rare commodity, but Dr. Graves seemed to offer it freely, masking any suspicion with his charm. Little did Alice know, her new relationship with Dr. Graves was about to lead her into a dangerous game, one she had no idea she was already playing. As their bond deepened, so too did the web of lies Dr. Graves had carefully spun. And lurking just beneath the surface, unseen by Alice, was a woman who would change everything: Anna Harper. As the months passed, Alice found herself drawn deeper into Dr. Graves' world. Their connection grew stronger, the intimacy between them more profound. Dr. Graves, with his deep knowledge of the human body and his effortless charm, seemed like the perfect match for Alice. He complemented her ambition, offering wisdom and encouragement, while she brought a sense of stability and ambition to his chaotic life. Their dates became more frequent, from dinners at private restaurants in Soho to walks in Central Park under the glow of city lights. It seemed perfect. Yet beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic relationship, Alice began to notice small, unsettling signs that suggested things might not be as they seemed. Dr. Graves, though charming and seemingly attentive, had moments when he would disappear for days, only to resurface with vague excuses. A sudden, emergency surgery here, a last-minute meeting there. At first, Alice didn't think much of it. After all, his career was demanding, and she, too, had her own responsibilities. But the inconsistencies began to gnaw at her. There were times when she would call, only for him to be unreachable. Times when he seemed distracted during their conversations, his thoughts somewhere else entirely. Despite these small red flags, Alice dismissed them. She was a woman of reason, and reason told her that Dr. Graves was simply busy. His life was high stakes, surely, a surgeon of his caliber didn't have the luxury of downtime. So, she pushed the doubt aside, allowing herself to believe in the fantasy they had created together. But as Alice sank further into the relationship, Dr. Graves was simultaneously entangled in something far more dangerous and deceitful. One evening in early 2019, Dr. Graves found himself at an art gallery in Chelsea, a place known for its eclectic mix of avant-garde artists and wealthy patrons. He wasn't there for the art, though. He was there for something else entirely. He hadn't expected it to happen, but when he saw Anna Harper, Alice's identical twin sister, standing across the room, something shifted in him. Anna, with her carefree spirit and bohemian style, immediately caught his eye. Where Alice was composed, driven, and structured, Anna was spontaneous, free-spirited, and full of life. Anna's beauty was unlike anything he had ever encountered, a striking contrast to the more polished, calculated elegance of Alice. She wore a flowy, colorful dress, a smile that seemed to light up the room, and an energy that radiated off her in waves. Dr. Graves found himself unable to look away. Their eyes met across the room, and for a brief moment, the noise of the gallery faded into the background. There was something magnetic about Anna, something that made Dr. Graves feel alive in a way he hadn't in a long time. They struck up a conversation, and within minutes, he was completely captivated. Anna's charm was different from Alice's. While Alice's confidence was grounded in her professional accomplishments, Anna's charm was untainted, pure, and almost childlike in its innocence. She had an openness, a vulnerability in her creativity, that drew him in. The way she spoke about her paintings, her love for life, made him forget everything else, the obligations, the relationships he was juggling, even the fact that she was Alice's sister. It wasn't long before their chemistry became undeniable. Dr. Graves, who had always prided himself on his control, was now losing it. He found himself seeking out Anna at parties, pretending their encounters were chance meetings, and before long, they were meeting outside of these social gatherings. Dr. Graves was living two lives, one with Alice, where everything was stable and structured, and another with Anna, where passion and spontaneity reigned. He could no longer deny that he was falling for Anna, too. Meanwhile, Alice, absorbed in her career and her growing love for Dr. Graves, began to feel the weight of his absence. Their relationship had begun to feel different. There were moments when he would cancel their plans last minute, or when his responses would come more delayed, less engaged. She noticed the small things, his phone always on silent, his eyes often darting to the clock during their dinners, the way he would seem preoccupied when they were supposed to be sharing a quiet moment together. It was subtle, but it was there. Alice could feel it. He was pulling away. Despite the growing unease, Alice couldn't bring herself to confront him. She trusted him, didn't she? He had always been there when she needed him, right? But the more time passed, the more Alice began to feel the cracks in their seemingly perfect relationship. She found herself questioning everything, the sudden disappearances, the unexplained absences, the moments of distraction that seemed too frequent to be merely coincidental. As Alice began to notice these signs, Anna, on the other hand, was growing more and more immersed in her secret relationship with Dr. Graves. She loved the thrill of it, her connection with him was exciting, a rush of adrenaline that made her feel alive in ways she hadn't experienced before. Anna, who had always lived on her own terms, found herself drawn to the forbidden nature of their romance. She knew it was wrong, but the thrill of the secret, the way Dr. Graves made her feel so special, was too intoxicating to resist. Dr. Graves, however, was starting to feel the weight of his double life. As his feelings for both sisters deepened, so did the guilt. He wanted them both, Alice's stability, her ambition, her grounded nature, and Anna's excitement, her spontaneity, her free-spirited energy. He was torn between them, unable to make a choice, and so he continued to live the lie. He told himself it was harmless. He justified it by telling himself that they would never find out. But deep down, he knew he was walking a dangerous line. The web he had spun was tightening, and soon, he wouldn't be able to escape its grasp. What had started as a harmless flirtation with two women, each so different, had become something far more complicated, and far more dangerous. As the tension grew, so did the lies, and the consequences of those lies would soon come crashing down. The perfect life Dr. Graves had worked so hard to build was beginning to unravel, one secret at a time. By the year 2020, Dr. William Graves had perfected the art of living a double life. On the surface, everything appeared flawless: a successful surgeon, a charming and respected figure in New York's elite social circles, and the devoted partner of Alice Harper, a woman who represented stability and ambition. To anyone who cared to look, Dr. Graves was the ideal man, leading an ideal life. But beneath the polished veneer, the truth was far darker. His relationship with Alice was everything he had told himself he needed: order, consistency, the quiet admiration of a woman who saw him as the hero. She was his anchor in a world that sometimes felt chaotic. But with Anna, the free-spirited, unpredictable twin, Dr. Graves had found a rush of excitement and passion that Alice could never provide. Where Alice demanded his attention with professional ambition and structure, Anna lured him into a world of spontaneity and creative freedom. It was thrilling, intoxicating, and dangerous. He was caught between two worlds, both of which fulfilled different parts of him, and neither could fully know about the other. His encounters with Alice were intimate and comfortable: candlelit dinners in quiet, upscale restaurants in Manhattan, weekends spent at art galleries, and conversations about their future. Yet, Dr. Graves couldn't ignore the growing sense of dissatisfaction that gnawed at him when he was with her. The spark that had once ignited between them had slowly faded into a comfortable routine, and he began to crave something more exciting, something new. This is where Anna came in. Anna's presence brought the chaos Dr. Graves secretly desired. Their relationship was secretive and thrilling, built on stolen moments at underground art shows in Brooklyn and whispered phone calls in the late hours of the night. She had a way of making him feel alive in a way that Alice never could. With Anna, there were no constraints, no expectations, just raw, passionate connection. They laughed, danced, and reveled in their shared secret, each moment heightened by the knowledge that it was forbidden. At first, Dr. Graves thought he could manage both relationships, keeping Alice in the dark about Anna and vice versa. He'd become a master of deception, knowing when to switch personas, when to play the doting partner and when to embrace the reckless lover. It was a dangerous game, but the stakes felt exhilarating. What could possibly go wrong? But as time went on, cracks began to show. His carefully constructed world began to unravel, and the pressure of maintaining these two separate lives was starting to take its toll. He'd grown used to lying to Alice, telling her he was working late at the hospital or attending charity functions when, in fact, he was with Anna. But the guilt started to seep in, eating at him. He was forced to distance himself from Alice, to hide his emotions behind a mask of indifference. When they were together, he couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment, as though he were living a lie, pretending to be someone he was not. Anna, meanwhile, sensed the tension. She had always been more intuitive than Alice, and despite Dr. Graves' attempts to hide it, she could tell that something wasn't quite right. Their secret relationship had been thrilling at first, but now it was starting to feel like a weight around her neck. She was used to living life freely, with no commitments or expectations, but being kept in the shadows of Dr. Graves' double life began to feel suffocating. The secrecy that once excited her now made her feel like an afterthought, a mere distraction to the man she thought was so different from everyone else. As the months dragged on, Alice began to notice the changes in Dr. Graves. At first, it was subtle. He was distracted, often checking his phone, his attention wavering during their conversations. His usual charisma seemed to falter, and he would grow quiet during dinners, staring off into the distance. Alice tried to brush it off. She had seen this before, his busy schedule, the stress of his work, but something in her gut told her that it was more than just that. One night, during a quiet dinner at an exclusive restaurant on Park Avenue, Alice confronted him. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. She had noticed the signs, the late nights, the excuses, the growing emotional distance. She wanted answers. "William, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to keep her composure. "You've been distant lately. You're not the man I met." Dr. Graves, who had been lost in his own thoughts, snapped back to reality. For a split second, a flicker of guilt crossed his face, but it was quickly masked by his usual charm. He smiled, attempting to reassure her. "I'm just tired, Alice. Work has been demanding, and you know how it is in my field. It's nothing, really." But Alice wasn't convinced. She had spent enough time around him to know when he was hiding something. The flicker of suspicion grew in her chest, but she pushed it aside, unwilling to fully confront the possibility that Dr. Graves might be hiding something more sinister. Meanwhile, Anna was feeling the strain of their secret. It was as if she could feel the distance growing between them, the shift in Dr. Graves' demeanor that mirrored her own growing discomfort. She wanted more than just stolen moments and whispered conversations in dimly lit rooms. She longed for the type of affection and security Alice seemed to have with him, yet she knew that wasn't possible. As much as she tried to ignore it, she couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Graves was keeping her at arm's length, emotionally unavailable, a shadow of the man she thought she knew. The tension between the three of them, Alice, Anna, and Dr. Graves, began to build to an unbearable point. Dr. Graves had no idea just how close he was to losing both women. His manipulation had worked for so long, but as the weeks passed, he couldn't ignore the mounting pressure. His world was on the verge of collapse, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down. But for now, he continued to live his double life, trapped between the safety and stability of Alice's love and the fiery, reckless passion of Anna. And all the while, the walls of deception closed in on him. His perfect world was beginning to crumble, and nothing would ever be the same again. The air in New York City had changed by 2022, there was a shift in the way people walked, in the way they spoke to each other. The energy of the city seemed to pulse with an underlying sense of dread, as though everyone knew something was about to snap. For Dr. William Graves, that snap was already coming, he just hadn't realized how close it was. Alice had begun to feel the cracks in their relationship more acutely. The late nights, the cancelled plans, the emotional distance, it all started to weigh heavily on her. But it wasn't just the typical signs of a busy professional that set off alarms in her mind. It was his coldness, the way his eyes seemed to avoid hers, how his touch had become mechanical. There was something else happening, something hidden just beyond her grasp. Alice had spent too many nights in silence, watching him retreat into himself, his mind elsewhere, to ignore it any longer. The tipping point came at a family gathering in Upper East Side, one of those rare events where Alice and Anna's family came together to celebrate the holidays. The air was thick with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warmth of family, yet underneath it all, there was an undercurrent of tension, an unspoken unease that gnawed at the sisters. Alice had arrived first, ever the professional, ever the composed one. She was trying to shake off the nagging feeling she had about Dr. Graves, trying to hold on to the relationship she had worked so hard to build. But when Anna walked into the room, wearing a flowing red dress, her eyes sparkling with energy, Alice couldn't shake the sinking feeling in her gut. There was something off, something Alice couldn't quite explain. The moment Anna entered, their eyes met. There was a subtle shift in the room, a feeling that neither could put into words but both instinctively understood. It wasn't until later in the evening, during a casual conversation between the two sisters, that the truth slowly began to unfold. They were sitting across from each other at the dining table, as family members chattered around them, oblivious to the brewing storm. Alice, with her usual sharpness, mentioned her plans for a weekend getaway with Dr. Graves. Anna, her brow furrowing slightly, hesitated before responding. "You know, I actually planned a surprise birthday celebration for him," she said with a faint smile, trying to remain lighthearted. The room seemed to fall into a heavy silence. Alice blinked, confused. "Wait, what do you mean? A birthday celebration?" Anna, feeling a tension she hadn't been able to ignore for months, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Dr. Graves. He's the one I've been seeing." Her voice was calm, but the words felt like daggers, piercing through the thick air. Alice's heart stopped. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her world tilted as everything she thought she knew about her relationship with Dr. Graves came crashing down. Her sister, her twin, had been seeing the same man. And it wasn't just some chance meeting. It was serious. The realization hit Alice like a tidal wave, washing away everything she had believed about the man she loved. She looked at Anna, whose face was flushed with the same shock and disbelief. Anna was just as blindsided by the situation as Alice was. Neither of them had known the other was involved with Dr. Graves. The weight of betrayal, of manipulation, of a relationship built on lies, was too much to bear. The anger was immediate. But it wasn't just anger at Dr. Graves. It was anger at themselves for not seeing it sooner. How had they been so blind? How had they let him play them against each other, using their shared love for him to create this web of deceit? As the night unfolded, the tension between the sisters grew. They tried to hold it together, to remain composed for the sake of family, but the cracks were too wide. They could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The bond they had shared was now tainted with the realization that Dr. Graves had kept them both in the dark for so long. The next day, Alice decided she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Her heart ached as she called Dr. Graves, her voice cold and firm. "I know about you and Anna," she said, barely able to keep the tremble from her voice. "You're going to explain everything to me, now." Dr. Graves, who had spent months carefully managing his relationships with both women, was taken off guard. He tried to play it cool, but the panic was evident in his voice. "Alice, please, let's talk about this calmly," he urged. "I never meant for you to find out like this. It's complicated, but Complicated?" Alice interrupted, her voice rising. "You've been lying to me, to both of us. You think I don't know what's going on? How long did you think you could keep this up? How long did you think we'd stay in the dark?" Meanwhile, Anna, feeling the weight of her own emotions, had also reached out to Dr. Graves. When she confronted him in person, her voice was quieter but just as firm. "How could you do this to us?" she asked, her eyes full of pain. "You've been lying to both of us. You made us think we were the only ones, and now I see what you've been doing." Dr. Graves, once calm and collected, found himself struggling to keep control. The facade he had carefully built over the past few years was beginning to crack, and there was no way to hold it together any longer. In a last-ditch attempt to salvage the situation, Dr. Graves tried to manipulate the sisters against each other. "You both bring something different into my life," he said, his voice low, attempting to smooth things over. Maybe you should see this as a compliment. You're both so special to me. But his words only deepened the rift. The sisters, once inseparable, were now divided. The betrayal they both felt was too much to bear. Alice and Anna, fueled by a mix of anger, confusion, and pain, realized that the man they had both loved and trusted was no longer the hero they thought he was. The confrontation with Dr. Graves was only the beginning of what would become a much darker and more dangerous game. The secrets, once hidden in the shadows, had come to light, and there was no turning back. The discovery that Dr. William Graves had been leading two separate lives shattered the fragile bond between Alice Harper and Anna Harper. The revelations hit them both like a freight train, one that threatened to undo everything they thought they knew about love, trust, and family. What had been a sisterly connection based on shared experiences, love, and mutual respect was now fractured, torn apart by betrayal and the manipulation of the one man they both had loved. The tension between the sisters was palpable. Once inseparable, they now found themselves trapped in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Alice, though heartbroken, was angry at Dr. Graves, angry at herself for being deceived for so long, but most of all, angry at Anna. She couldn't help but feel a stab of betrayal from her own sister. How had Anna not known the truth? How had she let herself fall for a man who was playing them both? For Anna, the feeling was no less intense. She had always been the more free-spirited of the two, the one who followed her heart without hesitation. But in this moment, that same heart felt broken, twisted by the realization that the man she thought she could trust had not only lied to her but had done so at the expense of her sister. She had fallen for Dr. Graves in a way that had felt genuine, real. Their moments together had been passionate, and for a while, she felt like she had found someone who truly understood her, the part of her that was wild, free, and untamed. But now, that illusion was gone, replaced by a bitter taste of deceit. In the days that followed, both women retreated into themselves. The once lively family gatherings that had been filled with laughter and light-hearted conversations now felt strained and uncomfortable. Family members who had once loved and supported them were caught in the crossfire of a war that neither Alice nor Anna had ever anticipated. The sisters could no longer look at each other the same way. Every shared glance was now charged with unspoken accusations. The bond they had once cherished was now riddled with doubt and resentment. Alice, in particular, felt the weight of this fracture. She had been the one to confront Dr. Graves first, demanding answers and facing the painful reality of his deceit. She had assumed that, as the more grounded of the two, she could handle the emotional turmoil of the situation. But now, with the full weight of the betrayal bearing down on her, she found herself questioning everything, her judgment, her trust in people, and especially her relationship with Anna. "I never thought it would be you," Alice said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. She and Anna were sitting together in the living room of their shared apartment, a vast, impersonal space that once felt like home but now felt cold, empty. Alice's words hung in the air, heavy and thick with sorrow. Anna turned away, unable to meet her sister's gaze. "I didn't know, Alice. I swear, I didn't know. I thought he was different," Anna said, her voice cracked with emotion. "He made me feel special, like I was the only one who mattered." Alice let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow and broken. "He made both of us feel that way," she snapped. "And look where that got us. Now we're both left with nothing but lies and manipulation." The word stung, and Anna recoiled as if struck. "I didn't ask for this, Alice. I didn't want it to happen. You think I wanted to hurt you?" Her voice trembled with anger and regret. "Then why didn't you say something sooner?" Alice's voice rose, a mix of pain and frustration flooding her. "Why didn't you notice the signs? How could you not see that he was playing both of us?" Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was in love with him, Alice. I thought he cared about me. And now I see it for what it really was. We were just pawns to him. The confrontation between the two sisters was inevitable, yet it left them both broken in ways they hadn't anticipated. The distance that had grown between them wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. They no longer shared quiet conversations over cups of tea, nor did they find solace in each other's presence during difficult moments. Every word they exchanged now seemed laced with distrust, every look fraught with unresolved tension. Their shared history, the memories they had built as sisters, had been tainted by the man who had come between them. In the midst of all this turmoil, Dr. Graves had remained silent. He knew that both women had confronted him, but instead of attempting to make amends or explain himself, he retreated. The man who once reveled in control now found himself cornered. He had spent years constructing his perfect life, but now everything was unraveling. The truth had caught up with him, and there was no way to put it back in the box. But Dr. Graves wasn't the only one retreating. As Alice and Anna continued to grapple with their new reality, both began to realize that there was no easy path forward. Their relationship, the one that had once been built on trust and shared experiences, was shattered. They couldn't go back to how things were. Alice found herself shutting Anna out more and more, choosing to bury her pain in her work and social life. She surrounded herself with her colleagues, people who saw her as strong and composed, unwilling to show them the cracks that had formed beneath the surface. Anna, meanwhile, became increasingly withdrawn. The carefree, vibrant spirit that had once defined her was now clouded by anger and regret. She stopped attending family gatherings, isolating herself in her apartment, her artwork, and a growing sense of anxiety. The vibrant colors she had once splashed onto her canvas now seemed muted, her creations reflecting the chaos and darkness in her own heart. She had trusted Dr. Graves, given him her heart, and now, all she felt was the sting of betrayal. As both sisters sank deeper into their separate worlds, one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same. The damage caused by Dr. Graves' deceit had irrevocably altered their relationship, leaving them with scars that neither time nor words could heal. The fracture between Alice and Anna was not just the result of a man's lies, it was a painful, irreversible shift in their lives, one that neither of them had the strength to undo. The once solid bond they had shared now lay in tatters, and both sisters were left to face the haunting reality that sometimes, the ones we trust the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. By the year 2023, the fragile remnants of Dr. William Graves' life had all but disintegrated. What had once been a carefully constructed facade of power, charm, and control was now nothing more than a hollow shell, held together by the weight of his lies and the tension of his double life. His manipulations, once smooth and calculated, now felt like jagged edges, cutting through the very relationships he had tried so hard to control. But it wasn't just Dr. Graves who was suffering. The destruction he had caused to Alice and Anna was immense, and now, the consequences of his actions would reach their deadly climax. The sisters, once close beyond measure, now found themselves irrevocably torn apart by the same man who had betrayed them both. Alice, consumed by a mixture of pain and fury, had begun to shut herself off from everyone, including Anna. The trust they had shared, the memories they had built together over a lifetime, now felt like an illusion. Anna, feeling the weight of her own guilt and isolation, withdrew further into herself, grappling with the overwhelming emotions of betrayal and regret. But neither of them could escape the truth that had been unveiled: they were both pawns in Dr. Graves' twisted game, and he had played them both for far too long. The tipping point came on a cold winter evening in February 2023, when Alice, after months of internal struggle and unresolved anger, finally made the decision to confront Dr. Graves one last time. She had sent him a message that was both direct and final: "Meet me at your apartment tonight. You need to make a choice. It's either me or her. You can't have both anymore." The words were simple, but their impact was profound. Alice wasn't just confronting Dr. Graves about his infidelity, she was confronting everything he had taken from her. Her trust. Her heart. The life she thought they would build together. And now, she demanded a choice. Meanwhile, Anna, sensing that something was terribly wrong, had also decided to confront Dr. Graves. She knew that he had been avoiding her for weeks, his promises of love and attention growing more distant and unfulfilled. Her suspicions had only grown in intensity as the days went by. Was he still seeing Alice? Was he still keeping her in the dark, just as he had done with Anna in the beginning? The thought of being strung along by him again, the thought of being another notch in his belt of deceit, was unbearable. She, too, was determined to confront him, to demand answers, to know where she stood in this twisted triangle he had created. As fate would have it, both sisters arrived at Dr. Graves' apartment on the same evening, unaware of each other's presence. The apartment, once a place of whispered promises and stolen moments, now felt cold and sterile, an empty shell of the love that had once been. Dr. Graves, unaware of what was about to unfold, greeted Alice with his usual charm, attempting to disarm her with a smile. But the moment he saw the cold resolve in her eyes, he knew something had changed. "Alice, you look stunning as always," he said, his voice oozing with insincerity. Alice didn't respond immediately. She simply stepped past him and into the apartment, her gaze sharp. "Cut the pleasantries, William," she said, her voice hard and unwavering. "I'm not here for small talk. I've had enough of the lies. You need to make a choice. Now." Before he could respond, the doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a sharp blade. Dr. Graves, his expression faltering for a moment, turned to open the door. And there, standing on the threshold, was Anna. Both sisters froze, eyes wide with shock, their gazes locking for the first time since the truth had come out. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Anna looked at Alice, then at Dr. Graves, her face a mix of confusion and horror. Alice, too, stood frozen, her heart racing as she pieced together the reality in front of her. He had been playing them both. All this time, he had made them believe they were the only one, while keeping them locked in a game of manipulation and deceit. "Anna, what are you doing here?" Dr. Graves stammered, his usual calm demeanor now cracking under the weight of the situation. "I think you know why I'm here," Anna replied, her voice cold and steady, masking the emotional turmoil raging inside her. Dr. Graves began, but his words faltered. He could feel the walls closing in on him. There was no escape. There was no rationalizing his way out of this. He had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. The confrontation that followed was nothing short of explosive. The sisters, once bonded by love and trust, now turned on each other, fueled by anger, betrayal, and the overwhelming realization of how deeply Dr. Graves had hurt them both. Words were thrown like daggers, each accusation piercing deeper than the last. "How long, William?" Alice demanded. "How long were you planning to keep us in the dark? How long were you going to keep lying to both of us?" Anna, voice trembling with rage, added, "You think we don't see it? You've been playing us both for months. We were nothing to you but a game." Dr. Graves, cornered and desperate, tried to regain control, but it was too late. "Please, let's just talk about this," he pleaded. "You both mean something to me. I never intended for it to get this far." But his words only fueled the fire. Alice, overcome with emotion, lashed out. "You never intended to hurt us? That's what you think? You think we're just going to forgive you?" Her voice broke, the pain too much to bear. The tension between the three of them escalated rapidly, and what had started as a heated verbal confrontation quickly turned into something far more dangerous. In a fit of frustration, Anna, feeling a surge of adrenaline and betrayal, grabbed a nearby object, a heavy glass vase. Without thinking, she swung it at Dr. Graves, shattering it against his head. The impact was sudden and brutal, sending Dr. Graves stumbling backward in shock, blood beginning to trickle down his face. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Dr. Graves, dazed and disoriented, reached for his head, his hands trembling. Anna stood frozen, eyes wide with horror at what she had just done. The reality of the situation hit her like a tidal wave. She had gone too far, and now there was no turning back. Dr. Graves, his mind racing, scrambled to regain control. "Anna. I didn't mean for this to happen," he whispered, his voice faltering. But Anna, consumed by the rush of anger and betrayal, didn't wait for him to finish. Her mind was a blur, the pain of being manipulated and deceived for so long now boiling over. Without thinking, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter, the cold steel gleaming in the dim light. "Stay away from me," she shouted, her voice raw with emotion. With one swift motion, she drove the knife into his chest. The sound of the blade sinking into flesh echoed through the room, and Dr. Graves gasped in pain, his eyes wide with shock. As Dr. Graves collapsed to the floor, Alice and Anna stood there, breathing heavily, their hands shaking. The reality of what had just transpired hit them both at once. The man they had once loved was now lying dead at their feet, the result of their pain, their anger, and their need for justice. The devastation was complete. In an instant, the lives of Alice and Anna had been forever changed, and Dr. Graves' manipulation had finally come to an end, tragically, violently, and irrevocably. But even as they stood in the ruins of their lives, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on them, leaving them with nothing but the haunting truth of their actions. In the wake of Dr. William Graves' death, New York City continued to hum with its usual frenetic energy, indifferent to the seismic shift that had just rippled through the lives of Alice and Anna. The brutal reality of what had transpired in Dr. Graves' apartment, the murder, the betrayal, and the emotional wreckage left behind, was something neither sister could easily escape. The pain of losing their sisterly bond, compounded by the horrific events they had both witnessed and, in Anna's case, caused, weighed heavily on them. Alice, now left to pick up the pieces of her life, struggled to reconcile the woman she had been with the one she had become. She had once been a confident business consultant, driven by ambition and a sense of purpose. But now, she was a woman broken by love, by lies, and by a betrayal so deep she wasn't sure she could ever recover. Her trust in people, especially in those she had loved most, was shattered beyond repair. She was haunted by the image of Dr. Graves, lying lifeless on the floor, and the aftermath of the violent confrontation that had sealed their fates. For Anna, the situation was no less devastating. She had never imagined that the man she had fallen in love with could betray her in such a cruel way. The violence of the moment, the look in Dr. Graves' eyes as he realized the depth of his betrayal, those images replayed over and over in her mind, leaving her mentally and emotionally scarred. The thrill she once felt when she was with him had been replaced by guilt, fear, and confusion. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. The act of taking his life, in an attempt to protect herself and her sister, was a burden that Anna could never shed, no matter how much she wished she could undo that one fateful night. The legal ramifications were inevitable. Both Alice and Anna found themselves trapped in a nightmare, one that was now publicly scrutinized and dissected by the media. News outlets picked apart every detail of the murder, sensationalizing the love triangle, the betrayal, and the tragic death of a respected doctor. But beyond the headlines and the courtroom drama, there were no easy answers. The damage was done, and both sisters were forced to face the consequences of their actions in ways they hadn't anticipated. In court, Anna's lawyer argued that she had acted in self-defense, that she had been pushed to the brink by Dr. Graves' manipulation and the emotional torment he had caused both her and Alice. The public, for the most part, sympathized with Anna's plight. They saw her as a victim, another woman torn apart by a man's deceit. But Alice, though she understood her sister's pain, couldn't bring herself to forgive Anna. She couldn't forget the horror of what had happened, the moment when Anna's actions had taken a life. The violence, the blood, and the guilt, it all felt too much to bear. In the end, Anna was found guilty of manslaughter, her sentence reflecting the tragic complexity of the situation. The jury acknowledged her emotional state, the overwhelming pressure she had faced, and the manipulation she had been subjected to. But still, the law could not look away from the fact that Dr. Graves was dead, and Anna's hands were stained with his blood. For Alice, the path forward was unclear. She couldn't move on from the past. The memories of Dr. Graves, of their once perfect relationship, were tainted forever. She spent her days trying to rebuild her life, focusing on her career and, in some ways, retreating into her work as a means of escape. But no matter how much she achieved, no matter how many deals she closed or accolades she earned, there was a hole in her heart that no amount of success could fill. Over time, Alice sought therapy to come to terms with her emotions. She worked on forgiving herself, learning to separate the guilt she felt from the responsibility she had to herself. Slowly, she began to understand that she could not control the actions of others, nor could she undo the damage that had been done. But she could learn from it, grow from it, and, one day, hopefully, find peace. As for Anna, she was left to navigate the harsh realities of her new life. Her time in prison, while brief, was enough to change her forever. The woman who had once been carefree, artistic, and full of life was now a woman deeply scarred by the consequences of her actions. Anna began painting again, using her art as a means of processing her emotions and understanding the darkness she had lived through. Her works, once full of joy and freedom, were now marked by sorrow and regret. Yet, through the darkness, she began to find a small semblance of redemption. Her journey wasn't over, but she was starting to learn that healing came in pieces, not in grand gestures or sudden epiphanies, but in the quiet moments of reflection and self-forgiveness. The tragedy of Dr. Graves' death, while the pivotal event of their lives, was also the beginning of a new chapter for Alice and Anna. Theirs was a story of survival, of learning the painful lessons of trust and betrayal, and of understanding the complexity of human emotions. It was a tale that was far from simple, and it left both women forever changed. What do you think about the story of Alice, Anna, and Dr. Graves? Was Anna justified in her actions, or did the violence go too far? Can Alice and Anna ever rebuild their fractured relationship, or is it beyond repair? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you and get your take on this tragic tale of love, betrayal, and redemption.